My name is Gregory Griffin, and I'd like to thank all of you who are Chartwell members, as well as anyone who is joining us for the first time. Our mission at Chartwell is to drive excellence in the utility industry by connecting the industry to solutions, and today's webinar is one of the many ways that we strive to achieve this goal. Without further ado, I would like to welcome up our partner for this webinar, SmartMeasures, who's going to be talking to us about how to recognize early stage financial stress in utility customers and what to do about it. The prep for this webinar has been really exciting. They've got a lot of really great practical ways to really increase the way that you're identifying customers and can really help you in that arrears management and collections realm.
Here's something that should give everyone in this room pause. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has documented that nearly half of Americans in financial hardship didn't know how or where to apply for assistance programs that they were entitled to. A further 48% assumed that they wouldn't qualify even when they actually would have. So the information exists for the customers, the programs exist, and people still aren't asking for help. The instinct when that happens is to send more communication, clearer letters, better awareness campaigns, more touch points. And there's a logic to that. If people don't know help exists, then tell them. But awareness isn't always the primary barrier. In fact, it's often not. The research tells us something more uncomfortable and more actionable. The reason people don't reach out is not that they don't know, it's how the financial stress makes them feel and what that does to their behaviour. So to understand that, we need to spend a moment on the psychology. There's a distinction in the psychological research that changes everything about how you design outreach. It's the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. And they produce opposite behaviours. Guilt actually pushes people toward repair, making it right. Shame pushes people away from anything that might confirm that feeling. For someone who's just missed their first bill, someone who doesn't see themselves as a person who misses bills, contacting their utility is an act that could confirm their worst fears about themselves. So they don't. Not because they're being difficult, because their brain is protecting them. There's a second thing happening at the neurological level, sort of illustrated in the drawing there by the little squiggle over the person's head. Financial stress activates the brain's threat response. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning, evaluating options, making calls, effectively goes offline. A person in that state can receive a perfectly clear letter about available support programs and can genuinely be unable to act on it. The cognitive capacity simply isn't there. And then the spiral starts. Shame leads to avoidance. Avoidance means the situation gets worse. A worse situation produces more shame. And each missed bill makes the next contact harder to respond to. The window for effective intervention narrows each time. This is why more outreach in the same tone, through the same channels, doesn't move the needle. You're sending information to people whose brains are simply not in a state to receive it. But here's what makes this genuinely complex and genuinely solvable. That psychology doesn't look the same in every customer. When you look at customers who aren't engaging, it's tempting to treat them as one group, but they're not. The psychology plays out in at least 3 distinct patterns, and each one needs a different response. The first group we call the unexpected. These are the customers that are new to hardship, perhaps never had a bill that's gone unpaid before. Their identity threat is at its highest. The gap between who they think they are and what's happening to them is widest, and the shame response is acute. What they need before anything else is normalization, a message that says, this happens to people like you. Asking for help is the right thing to do, and reaching out will not define you. Affirmation before ask. The second group are stretched. They've been in financial stress long enough that acute shame has shifted into something closer to resigned disengagement. The spiral has been running longer. And here, heavy empathy can backfire. It highlights a vulnerability that they have learned to manage. What works is being matter-of-fact, practical, respectful, treating them as capable people navigating a tough situation, not fragile people who need rescuing, and making sure that every program they may be entitled to is visible and easy for them to reach. And the third group, the reluctant, are behaviourally different in a fundamental way. The shame mechanism isn't driving their disengagement, which means the entire psychological toolkit changes. Social norms work better here because the lever is conformity, not shame reduction. The message isn't, we understand you, reach out. It's, this isn't how most customers handle this. Different driver, different design. And critically, resources spent on this group the wrong way are resources that you're not spending effectively on the first two. So what does it actually look like when you design for the psychology rather than against it? When the psychological diagnosis is right, the contact strategy looks completely different, not just in tone, but in what the message is actually trying to do. These messages talk to the customer in the decision environment that they are in. It's not the process that needs changing. They just need to be led to it differently. One message, one tone, one channel, and you're almost certainly wrong for 2 out of 3 of those groups. The organisations getting the best results from hardship programs aren't doing more outreach. They're starting with a better understanding of who they're actually talking to. The fact that this approach works is demonstrated by the study of millions of customers to establish the segmentation, as well as research done by other leading research houses, which backs up our findings. I also understand, I think Eric referred to that Con Ed in a recent Chartwell webinar spoke about the application of some facets of behavioural science as a key part of their success in reducing arrears. And all of this raises the obvious operational question. How do you know which customer is which before you contact them? And how do you know that at scale? The psychology tells us what is driving behaviour and what to say to them, but to act on it, you need to be able to identify which pattern you're looking at for each customer in your data before you make contact. The thing is that financial stress isn't hidden. Even when customers go quiet, their behaviour changes. The way they interact or stop interacting with your systems tells a story. Financial stress leaves behavioural fingerprints. And that's exactly what Mike is going to show you, how the AI engine reads those fingerprints and what that makes possible.
The first is there's no need to replace your existing collection systems and processes or to commission a new major IT project. And the second is that you're going to have all the data you need already. And I'll talk about this in a second. Your compliance and governance frameworks still apply to this new approach. You don't need to change those frameworks. So let's talk a bit about how you can identify these customers which will have a problem down the track. The good news is that the utilities, you already have vast amounts of data that is the key to identifying these issues. And it's important to look at a wide range of signals. So it's not just the financial signals, it's not just the payment behaviour, it's not just the invoices and all of the financial indicators. But it's important to look at both the things that the customer does, those behavioural signals, and also the signals that the utility inflicts on the customer. So by that I mean, things like price rises, the product that was sold, the acquisition channel. So it's the outbound stuff as well as the inbound stuff, the behavioural stuff you're seeing from the customer. So some examples of this are just looking at all of your outbound comms, like your price rise notifications, new products, things like that, but also the inbound stuff like the calls to the call centre, the use of your self-service portals. But there's also some other things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So things like the product that was sold, the billing cycle, the day of the month that the bill's actually issued is important. Changes in the bills, frequency, the changes in the payment behaviour, changes in the self-service. So things like that. But it is actually important that you need quite a big range of customers to predict these patterns, and you need a lot of signals per customer, typically around 3,000 to 4,000 signals per customer. So what do you do once you have all of those fingerprints? How do you pull it all together? It's important to know that these predictions are really just the start of the answer. So if you've got predictive algorithms and models in the past, that's not really the total picture. It gives you some indications and helps you get some insights, but it doesn't actually help you fix the problem. So it's important, once you've identified who's at risk, you need to engage them. And for that to be effective, you need to use behavioural science. Use a behavioural scientist to design messages, in other words, treatment strategies, specific to the different debt types. And the messages must be designed to augment, not to replace your current collections activity. Your standard governance and compliance frameworks still need to apply to these new messages. Testing and measuring is critical. You need to measure all of this against control groups, not only to detect which messages are going to work, but to also continuously measure so that you know when things stop working, because these things do stop working and you need to evolve. Once you have a pool of treatments that are known to work, you're ready to scale. And treatments can be allocated based on what's the most likely treatment to change the outcome for each at-risk customer. And so you typically use a second AI to achieve that goal. The governance frameworks, as I mentioned, need to apply, and these treatments should be sent through your existing message delivery platforms. And the reason that's important is so that you still have all of the records and all of the compliance that you need to ensure that your programs are successful. You need to make it a weekly cycle, because your customers change, the data is constantly changing, and the AI is constantly learning. So let's talk a little bit about how you measure success. There's things that you should be measuring both on a short-term basis and a long-term basis. Short-term, you should be looking at changes in engagement. So compared to a control group, do you see an uplift in inbound calls or use of your self-service portal? Do you see, even if you don't see that increase in inbound contact, do you see a materially different payment behaviour? Do you see people signing up to one of the support programs? So these are all short-term measurements, and they act as lead indicators to whether or not your program is on track or not on track. But you also need to measure long-term indicators. So things like the reduction in the number of collection cases, the reduction in the cost to collect, reduction in your long-term debt, and in reduction in your write-offs. Some of the examples of the results we've seen using this type of approach compared to control groups, we've seen a nearly 15% reduction in collection cases and a 9.5% reduction in accounts with an overdue balance more than 90 days. But it's important to realise that you can't just use this approach and turn off your current systems. The underlying processes driving your support programs and your collections activity still need to be running. This approach is leveraging those systems to derive the new outcomes. In effect, it's driving more engaged customers and making those systems more efficient.